That is perhaps the most obvious evidence of Indians in the community, but so many other ways to participate and claim that identity. And Dr. Williams will tell us all about that.
Thank you, Alina, and good evening, everyone. I wanted to do a little explanation first. See some of us walking around with black crosses on our foreheads. It's not that we didn't wash our faces today. It's because today's Ash Wednesday, and those of us who are Catholics got ashes put on to start the period of 40 days of penance. Okay, so now you know. There are two of us sitting up here with black crosses on our foreheads. It's interesting, all of our journeys are different. Mine started when I was maybe about 10 or 11 years old. My mother and I did not get along very well when I was young because I was always exploring things and asking questions, and she got tired of me asking questions. But when I was about 11 or 12, she started telling me stories of her life. And we would sit on the front porch and talk about this. And I would listen to her. And that's when I learned we had Native American heritage, Seminole, because we're from Florida. The Seminoles were Creeks at one time, but they were in Alabama and Georgia, and they moved from there to Florida. So I realized that information. When I went to college at Xavier University in New Orleans, that university was formed for blacks and Indians. And we had several Indian students there, and I was friends with one from Oklahoma who was Creek. And, but we never really got into anything culturally, but we always stuck with academics. And I graduated and left there, and one summer I was on a train going to Seattle, Washington, I think, and I'd gone to the dining car to eat. And a fellow sitting by himself beckoned me to come sit with him, and I came to sit with him. Let me sit with him. And he said, "Are you Indian?" I said, "Well, I have Indian ancestry, so I'm Indian, and I'm from Oklahoma. You look just like my relatives." And I thought, well, you know, maybe I better look into my heritage. But that sort of went on vacation for a little while. And about 3.5 years ago, I learned that there was an Indian center in Angeles National Forest, which is not too far from where I live in Pasadena. And I thought, well, I'll check up there and see what's happening, see what's going on, see if I recognize anybody. So I went up there and looked around, and there were people who looked like me, but there were people who looked like all sorts of different people. There were light-haired people and dark-haired people. I thought, hey, this is us. And I saw this book, Black and Red People or something like that, and I said, yeah, I'd like to have this book. We only had one copy, and the person at the desk said, oh, the author's right over there. The author turned out to be Valena. And she said, oh, I have a whole stack in my car. So she went out to her car and got a book, and I brought it home and read it. And then we had lunch together to discuss it and everything. That was my beginning of the journey. The second part of the journey was getting together with Catholic Indians. I kidded with my sister about going to African Heritage Masses, and they're 2 hours long, and I thought, oh, they're very wild. Let me go to the Masses that are 45 minutes an hour. Well, I went to my first Native Mass, and guess what? It was 2 hours long. And it was so similar, so soul-filled, just like the African Heritage Masses that I'd gone to. And I've become friends with these people, and working together. And Sylvia is here tonight. She wasn't sure she was coming. But Sylvia and I worked together with Native American concerns with the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And we were working together with that. So that's part of my journey where I am heading right now. 2 points I'd like to make. In the movie, the person talked about he didn't like the idea of being called a black Indian. He didn't like that identity. And the latest term is Native people who grew up in the non-Native culture. So that's me. I'm Native who grew up in a non-Native culture. And so that sort of solves that. Secondly, Native Americans and African Americans have worked very closely together. My great-great-grandfather was the Indian entry into our family as far as we but what the thing that brought them together was the blacks had learned English on the slave plantations, and the natives knew the swamps. So during the wars, they worked together because the Indians tied the blacks in the swamps, and the blacks could speak English and know what the whites were doing. So that was one way they got together. And so we share some of the same patterns, behavior patterns. And what I'm working on now through an organization called Reevaluation Counseling is how to work on helping us get over that pain, the pain of the dislocation, the pain of the misidentification or not being identified as who we are, not being allowed to identify as who we are, and how to get over the pain of the losses that we've had, the loss of the land, and et cetera, and et cetera. And one thing we've discovered is that by listening to each other and hearing each other's stories is a way of helping to work through the pain, because we then realize and begin to take form in our heads that we're all the same. There's only one race. And once we identify and recognize identities and work on them, we then move from that to the one race idea. And I brought some forms with me. We want to form a talking circle. And anybody who's interested, they're on the table out there. Anybody who's interested may fill them out and leave them with me. And ultimately, sometime this year, we'll get together, at least have one talking circle and move on to others. Thank you for listening.